Secretary of State Bill Gardner was in a good mood this week. And why not? After all, the primary votes were counted, and it seems New Hampshire is far and away tops in the nation when it comes to civic engagement. In 2016 primaries, more than 52% of you cast a ballot here in New Hampshire. Congratulations, because only one other state, that's Wisconsin, actually broke 40%. It is worth noting, though, that both states require a photo ID at the polls, and that's a law that critics said would chip away at turnout. Joining me to talk about it, we have Republican State Senator Regina Birdsell and Democratic State Senator Donna Soucy. Good to see you. So let's start there. Senator Birdsell, you were with Secretary Gardner when he released these numbers, and you said that, you know what, I think the voter ID law actually helped spur turnout. Why do you think that?
Well, I think it helps spur turnout mostly because I think people are starting to have some confidence in the electoral system, and the more people have confidence in it, the more they're going to turn out, and they're going to have confidence that their vote counts. It's one person, one vote.
Senator Soucy, obviously you probably disagree with that, because heading into when the voter ID law was being debated, everybody said, you know what, this is going to disenfranchise voters and it's going to drive down turnout. Doesn't appear to be the case.
Doesn't appear to be driving down turnout. In some cases, it's a bit of an inconvenience for people, but I think our focus always needs to be ensuring that people can exercise their constitutional right to vote. Here in New Hampshire, we have an engaged, informed electorate that obviously is doing that.
Do you think the photo ID law has worked for the most part?
I think for the most part, I think the issue of cameras is still one that will be debated in the coming years. Certainly issues relative to domicile and other things Regina and I have debated considerably in the Senate, and will continue to do so.
Yeah, 60 pieces of legislation in this last cycle. Is that correct? Somewhere around those lines?
When you look at the House and the Senate bills, I think it's pretty close, because I know just the House alone, we had 35 this year.
Yeah, and so many other states are doing different things, whether it's absentee ballots, mail-in ballots, things to make things more convenient, and it hasn't really worked in terms of the turnout here. What are we doing, by your estimation, right? Start with you, Senator.
Well, I think, like Senator Soucy said, I believe that we have a much our electorate is much more informed on some of the decisions. I think that the voter ID has helped. And again, I said, the more people have confidence in our electoral system, then they're going to go ahead and participate. And I've talked to Secretary of State Gardner often, and he has stated that those states that have spurned into the 2-month start voting 2 months prior, mail-in ballots, all of those states that have started that process has actually their voting has gone down. So I think the more you try and it feels like the more you try and open it up, the less people want to really participate. So I'm happy that New Hampshire feels really engaged and with our turnout, and I'd love to see us at 60, 65%, 75, 100%.
Yeah, no, that would be great. I mean, what's your take on this? Obviously, this was a cycle where a lot of people were paying attention.
It was a cycle where there was an open primary on both sides of the ballot, so that obviously encourages more people to come out. We had some interesting candidates that I think really increased participation and interest in the electoral process. And we do have good systems in place in New Hampshire already. We have an opportunity to react and respond to the Iowa caucus, but we're the first primary, so we're the first real contest. And I think that just continues to keep people interested, engaged, and I think we as legislators need to make sure we have processes in place that make it easier for people to vote.
Now New Hampshire represented itself well as first in the nation primary. A lot of people engaged and out there meeting. We do have special access, so we can appreciate that. Let's talk about the residency requirement. This is something that Secretary Gardner said that he'd like to get done here, whether it's 30 days, 10 days. He thinks there should be some sort of benchmark at least, saying that I've lived in New Hampshire for a certain period of time before I can vote. Senator Soucy, this is something that Democrats don't like, because once again the argument's being made that this is going to disenfranchise so many voters. Why?
Well, it's actually fairly settled case law that it's unconstitutional to apply unnecessary burdens on people when they're trying to vote. The fact that you even said 30 days, 10 days, it's an arbitrary number. The most significant factor is what someone's intent is, and if their intent is to live in the state, we have same-day voter registration. People provide an ID, they register to vote at the polling location. The system is working. There isn't fraud. We engage in the legislative process to either solve problems or to achieve goals. In this case, there isn't really a problem because there hasn't been any reported fraud.
And that's what the argument you're going to hear moving forward, but this is something you think that should be done.
I do. I think that the electorate, looking at the polls, the electorate has said that they don't trust the system because almost 65, if not more, 65% want some kind of residency requirement. They want to make sure that when a voter goes into the voting booth, that they have some confidence that the voter that's voting next to them has some impact.
That their vote counts.
That their vote counts, and that the person that's voting next to them has an invested interest in the community, and in the community that they're going to be impacting in the election.
You talked about those polls. I just want to throw up some numbers real quick. Back in March, we did ask in our Granite State poll what people thought about supporting a residency requirement, and right there you have like a little less than 2 out of 3 people supporting the idea. I didn't mean to cut you off in the middle of your thought, though. But there isn't the widespread problem that people, fear would happen, and that's one argument that you're going to hear.
Everyone thought the sky was going to fall when we did the voter ID. The 10-day residency requirement, I don't think it's too much to ask, and I don't think our citizens believe it's too much to ask that someone is voting next to them that has a vested interest in the community that's going to be impacting the economy. You don't want to have someone who's coming in 3 days before an election, working on a campaign, 5 days before an election, coming in, registering same day, voting, and then taking off to the next primary state and basically kind of doing the same thing. And that based on what we've heard this year with Bernie Sanders, the campaign workers working for Bernie Sanders, they were telling people to vote in using their address, the Bernie campaign's address. So whether or not you believe that there's voter fraud or no voter fraud, I think it's important that we at least allow the electorate to give them the confidence that we do have some, we are listening to them.
And why not take that step just to protect? I mean, the last thing we want is a national embarrassment here in New Hampshire, as we're constantly fighting to keep our position in the primary.
But I would say 2 things to that. What about the person who's buying a home here in New Hampshire who has a closing that gets delayed 2 days? So instead, they have a 9-day residency requirement. So we're going to disenfranchise them. We're not going to allow them to exercise their constitutional right to vote. I think if we're concerned about whether people are moving around, we should be pursuing legislation like the Senate passed this time with e-poll books, so that there is an electronic check and there's access to the checklist on a statewide basis. That way, if somebody tries to register to vote in another place, if they've already voted once during the course of that day, they would then be tagged with voter fraud.
I smell
That's the way to go
something
after it.
Brewing here for the next session, perhaps, there, when it comes to that?
Yes, Regina and I both supported e-poll book legislation this time around. It didn't make it through the House, but
no,
you did not. I'm sorry. I do apologize. I'm sorry.
But the one thing that we have done, it passed the Senate and it passed the House, was the cross-check program, where it allows the Secretary of State to get into a program with almost 30 other states to look at duplicate registrations and duplicate votes. So after the November election, they're going to start pulling some of the
Make sure no one's double dipping.
Exactly.
All right, we got to get out of here, but I appreciate you guys being here. I'm sure we'll debate the residency requirement. The only reason I did say 10 and 30 days because those are the last 2 bills there. It wasn't completely arbitrary. Good to see you. Thanks for joining us. Happy 4th of July.